I want to start by asking you to think about a time in your life where you had a responsibility or a role or an assignment, or someone asked you to do something, or they told you to do something, or you just had to do something that was what you thought was beyond what you were capable of doing, that you thought was beyond your ability. Maybe it was the first time you were a parent. You had this kid and you think, wow, there are no instructions. Where are the instructions on how I raise this little kid? Maybe it was becoming the parent of 3 kids within 4 years and you were in your 40s. Maybe that was the case. That's my case right now. And maybe it was caring for a family member who's getting older. Maybe it was a job opportunity. Maybe it was a certain part, a new responsibility in your job. Maybe it was something like jury duty, or being asked some responsibility, some civic duty that you had to respond to, and you felt a little bit overwhelmed, a little bit scared about it, had trepidation about it. Or maybe it was something that you weren't asked to do. You know, you ever heard the phrase that I didn't choose that job, it chose me kind of deal, where you felt compelled, that you saw something that needed to be done, and you felt like, I could do that, or I could do that better. And it was something that mattered so much to you that you couldn't just walk away. You couldn't just kind of turn your back and say, let somebody else do that. Maybe you even felt kind of a sense of calling to that particular responsibility, even though you knew that stepping out and saying yes to that, or taking on that responsibility or that particular opportunity, that it would require sacrifice, it would require work, there'd be criticism, there'd be risk that you would take. He would say, why are you doing that? Some people would be glad, some people would not be glad. You know, there was risks associated with stepping out into the arena. But you did so anyway. Well, what I want to do in this series is that if you are in that kind of situation, or as you look toward the future, as those kind of opportunities come to you, there's always going to be those little voices that tell you you can't. That'll discourage you. And when that happens, I want you to ask yourself this question. When it's too much, it's too important to walk away, to shirk that opportunity or that responsibility, to say, if not you, then who? If not you, then who? Or maybe a better way to ask it, why not you? Because it could be that there is a special influence or leadership or authority or even power, to use maybe a word that we don't like to maybe think about using, but that you have a certain power that you could bring to bear in this particular opportunity or circumstance or relationship or job or whatever it is that you bring to bear that maybe nobody else has. An opportunity, a responsibility, something that you could leverage, okay, an influence or a power. And so why would you, for something that matters so much, why would you walk away? Why would you turn your back? Why would you advocate that responsibility to someone else for something that matters so much? Okay? When it comes to authority and responsibility, to quote a great famous philosopher who dressed in red, white, and blue and had a mask and had spider blood in his veins, Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. I'm like the whole, like the early 2000 Spider-Man, you know. What is it, Tobey Maguire, is that his name? Yeah, I love it so much I can't even think of his name right up here right now. But yeah, that was the good Spider-Man back in that day. With great power comes great responsibility. And when you look at the Bible, the way the Bible describes you, it describes you as someone with great power. In Genesis chapter 1, we are told the story of creation. We'll start off a new year with the beginning of the Bible. Begin a new year with the first chapter in the Bible. And God creates everything. He creates the heavens and the earth. He creates the seas, the sky. He creates birds, animals, plants. And then on the 6th day, this crowning day of creation, He creates human beings. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, this is what God says. This is how God makes mankind, humankind. And this is what He makes that is unique about us. It says in Genesis 1:26, as God said, let us, interesting that God says let us. God speaks of himself in a plural form, perhaps a hint at Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Trinity, early in the pages of the Bible before they even knew anything about that. Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness. God says, let's make a special creature, a special being. And though he'll have flesh and blood like all the other animals, he's going to be different. For this creature will be in our image. I will stamp my image upon him and upon her. My image, my likeness. Now, to say that we're made in the image of God, what does that mean? A lot of times I'll ask kids and going through confirmation class or our Own It or something like that, which is what we call our confirmation class. They're 6th grade, 5th, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, getting ready to make their profession of faith. What does it mean to be made in God's image? And usually the answer is that it means, they'll say something like, it means we look like God, which is what we would naturally think. We talk about being made in God's image or in God's likeness, but that's not what it means, that we look like God, okay? Because God is spirit. God doesn't look like anybody. A few years ago, 10, 12 years ago, I made a trip to the Holy Land and went to Israel. And when I flew over, we flew into Jordan before we went over the Jordan River into Israel. And everywhere you go in Jordan, the king in Jordan is named King Abdullah. And everywhere you go in Jordan, you see pictures of the king, okay? Whether it's in houses, whether it's in places of business, whether it's in hotels, you see the picture of the king of Jordan. And everywhere you see that image of the king, I mean, not only do you see he's on the money and everything, you see the image of the king, that is a sign that we are under this king's authority. This is our ruler. This is our leader. Now, in America, we don't see pictures of the president everywhere. I mean, you turn on the TV, that's the most likely face you will see is the president. Usually our national symbol is more the flag than the president. We don't have a king, although if you look on our money, you'll see images of dead presidents. I mean, but if you go into a government building, a particular branch of the government, usually there near the entrance somewhere, there's a picture of the president to say this is the guy in charge. This is the guy who has the authority ultimately over this particular government branch or department or building or whatever. Which just underscores the point that the image of the ruler, the image of the one who has authority, is a sign to everyone else of who's in charge. And so the fact that you are made in the image of God means that we are to be a sign to all of creation of who is in charge. The creatures look to you as they look to God. You are a reminder to all of creation of who's in charge. And that's why immediately after God says, let us make mankind in our image and our likeness, the next word is, so that they may rule. So they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals and all the creatures that move along the ground. So from the beginning, your very creation and the idea of your coming into existence, of our coming into existence, has to do with authority. Has to do with the very power, the authority of the one who rules over all, sharing that authority with this particular creature that is different than all the others. Now, we're different than all the others in other ways too. We can relate to God, we have a sense of morality, all these things. But it begins with authority. Verse 27. So God created mankind in His own image. The theme of Genesis, the way it goes when God says He's going to do something, He does it. God created mankind in His own image. In the image of God He created them. Male and female He created them. In verse 28. So God blessed them and He said to them, now God's speaking to the people. And He's pronouncing a blessing upon them and says, be fruitful and increase in number. Notice the nature of this blessing or what it has to do with. Fill the earth and subdue it. I think it's important to say, He says subdue the earth. It doesn't say abuse the earth. Okay? Subdue it. Rule over it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living thing that moves on the ground. There's again that word rule, authority. I'm giving you responsibility to take care of the earth, and I'm also going to give you the power, the authority to do it. You will be a reminder to creation of who is in charge. You will be like, a good word to describe is stewards. We're not in charge, but we rule in the stead of the one who is in charge, ultimately to be accountable to Him. Another way to describe it, I mean, basically when you look at these chapters of Genesis, these verses in Genesis that describe where we came from, you could say that we are given authority to carry out the responsibility of governing God's creation. God places His image in the created order that He just made as a reminder of who is in charge. And that image is you and me. So, just as God has authority, you have authority. Just as God is to rule, you are to rule. That's what He said. Rule over. Take care of it. Don't abuse it. Rule over it. As God has power, you have unique powers among all the creatures in God's realm. As God initiates, you are to be an initiator. You are to use the gift of authority given to you for good. And that involves, just like God creates, God initiates, you are not supposed to sit and do nothing. A person with responsibility and authority is not a good leader if they do nothing. No, you are to initiate to make a difference. You were made, just like God, to make a difference. You were made to make a difference. And so in the cosmic drama of history that is unfolding for us every moment that passes, every year that passes, that we see in the Bible, we see through history, in the great stage of history, you were made to be an initiator, not a spectator. You weren't meant to be on the seats or even on the sidelines. You were made to be on stage, to be an actor, to be a player, to be an influencer, not to be a spectator on the sidelines or in the seats. Now, one thing about if you're a sports fan or if you like to go to the movies or you go to see plays or whatever, being a spectator, there is some involvement if you're a spectator. I mean, you don't do nothing. I mean, there is such a thing as home field advantage, okay? If you go into a place, the spectators can play a role and they can actually influence the outcome. There's no question about it. But there's definitely less risk involved if you're a spectator. You don't have to do anything. You paid your money, you got a ticket, you can sit there and do nothing if you want to. You can leave, okay? You can go get some popcorn, go get a Coke, or if your team's not doing bad and you're just frustrated and you're disgusted, you can just get up and leave, If they're getting killed or maybe they're way, way ahead, and you're just bored, you can leave. But those in the arena, on the playing field, on stage, can't do that. They have to finish it out. They've got more invested in the game than you do, even though sometimes you might not think so. Definitely more risk involved. You expose yourself to criticism. But when it comes down to it, ultimately, the spectators are all talking about the initiators. It's the initiators who are really making the difference. And so the question is, which one are you going to be in 2019? Will you be a spectator or will you be an initiator? Will you leverage the influence that you have been given for good, for those that you care about, for the community that you care about, for yourself? Or will you just kind of see what unfolds? Will you be at the mercies of circumstances around you? Which one honors the God that made you? Because you see, when you really boil it down, what spectators do most of the time, fans cheer, right? And it's great to get on a bandwagon. But spectators love to criticize. Spectators criticize, but it's initiators that capitalize on the opportunities that they have, knowing those opportunities is limited. And you can spend your time and energy criticizing or watching what someone else is, somebody else who's an initiator, or you can be an initiator. Spectators criticize, but initiators capitalize on their opportunities. So when you don't take a responsibility, when you don't take initiative, when you don't leverage the authority that God has given to you, what this means is that somebody is missing out. Okay? Creation is missing out because God made you. And I think that's really a critical, where does it come down to? Am I here by accident, or did God make me? I believe God made you, and you are here for a reason and for a purpose. And so when you don't initiate, creation misses out. Other people miss out because you haven't capitalized on the opportunity, on the God-given responsibility that you have to make a difference in their life for good. If you're a parent, you are in a unique place to influence your children. If you are a spouse, it will take initiative. It will take initiation, or to take initiative to have a healthy relationship. It doesn't happen by accident. If you have certain gifts, if you are a manager at a job, if you are a student, there will not be certain opportunities that will not open if you don't take an initiative. Okay? If you're a college student, if you don't get in that professor's face and say, teach me how to do this, okay? Looking back, I wish I would have initiated some more in different seasons of my life. If you're a citizen of the United States and you care about your country, be an initiator. Step out there. Step out there. You expose yourself to risk and criticism to step out, but somebody's got to lead. Somebody's got to run for office. Somebody's got to get out there and try to make a difference. Capitalize on the opportunity that's given to you. If you're a follower of Jesus, how much more important to initiate, to capitalize on the opportunity. Because if you don't, who will? If not you, then who? If you're not the one who's influencing your kids, if you're not the one who's out there in the public discourse and marketplace, if you're not the one who's trying to pour into your spouse or your job or spreading the good news of Jesus, if you're not influencing, who is? Because I guarantee you someone will. About 18 years ago, 17, 18 years ago, I read a book that changed my life. The book was called Wild at Heart by John Eldredge. If you are a guy, I recommend you read that book. It's kind of dated, 17, 18 years ago. But it changed my life. Probably every 4 or 5 years, I'll come across a book like that. Well, that will just influence me in a whole new way, a new direction. And you opened up Wild at Heart, and there's a quote at the beginning of the book. It's a quote from Theodore Roosevelt, former president of the United States. 1913, 1912, something in a speech. He said these words. I want you to hear them, okay? He said, "It is not the critic who counts." He said, "It is not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. No, the credit belongs to the man in the arena whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat." That's a great quote, isn't it? That just gets you fired up, just like I'm ready to go fight that battle to the death that we talked about earlier, right? No, just kidding. No, that's a great quote. And I've had friends who that quote inspired them. I got a friend from my hometown. He's just a couple years older than me. Ran for mayor of my hometown after he said, I don't, and won. He said, I could be on the sidelines criticizing what everybody else does, or I could be the man in the arena. And he was challenged to get out there and make a difference. And he did. You see, friends, life is an arena. Life is an arena. And you, whether you accept it or not, you are a player. You are a player on the field of life. And yes, you will make mistakes. You will mess up. You will be criticized. You will be second-guessed. But one sure way to guarantee you'll never do anything is to do nothing. I mean, maybe a sign that you are being second-guessed and criticized is that you're doing the right thing. If you use Jesus as an example, you think Jesus led the resistance that he would face, prevented him from doing what God was calling him to do? Thank God for all of our sakes, he didn't. Life is an arena, and whether we're afraid or not, we got to get in the game. We've got to get in the game, especially if you're a follower of Jesus, because we believe that the stakes are eternal. That literally someone's eternal destiny could be decided by whether or not you initiated, whether or not you had a conversation, whether you shared. I mean, that's a serious thing to think about. But it puts everything in perspective, in the big picture. Are we spectators? Is it somebody else's job? Or are we initiators? Is it our job? Because you see, for all of us, we have been given authority. You have been given authority. You're a child of God, made in the image of God. You have authority. You're a believer in Jesus. You have authority. You have 2019, a brand new year. You have authority. You have an opportunity. You're an American, for goodness sake. You have resources available to you that 99% of the world doesn't have. You have been given authority. And now the question is, what will you do with it? How will you use it? How will you leverage that authority given to you? I love the way the book of Revelation describes us, okay? Some people read Revelation, they're like freaked out because there's like blood up to horses' bridles, and locusts that attack people and eat their brains, I can't imagine why they're not freaked out, why they're freaked out about it. But really, Revelation is like a spiritual perspective of what's happening through all of history. And I love the way that Revelation describes those who belong to Jesus. Because oftentimes the imagery that's used there, do you know how we're described? What we're wearing? Not togas. These like white robes, but a crown. They're wearing a crown. Now, in Revelation chapter 5, verses 9 and 10, there's a hymn of praise that the living creatures that are around the throne, which represent all of creation, are singing to the Lamb, who is the only one worthy in heaven to open the seal, the scroll with its 7 seals that represent the revelation of God in history. And they sing this song of praise to the Lamb of God, who, of course, we know represents Jesus. And this is what they say about him. They said, "You were slain, and this is why you should be praised. You were slain, and with your blood you purchased for God persons from every tribe and language and people and nation. All races, all languages, all nationalities. They're everywhere." And this was written in like the late 1st century. So by this time there weren't that many nations now we can definitely say this has been fulfilled. And this is what it says about them. "You have made them to be a kingdom and priest to serve our God, and they will reign on the earth. You will reign. You are given His authority. He reigns. But He has made you to be a kingdom and priests to reign with Him. That's pretty awesome. That's pretty powerful. If you could get a glimpse of it, and maybe one reason why, if you believe in this sort of thing, I do, but if you believe there's a spiritual enemy, why he fears you, is because of your power, because of your authority. And if you ever learned how to leverage that and use that, what a force you would be. So, no more victimization. You are not helpless. You are a co-regent with Christ. You are not at the mercy of circumstances or dates on a calendar. You are servants of the Most High God, the one who has all authority. He has shared His authority with you. You are to be a sign to all of creation of who is in charge. Because great authority and power has been given to you. And with great power comes great responsibility. So let's take it. Let's take responsibility. Let's own our authority. And let's make a difference for what matters the most in 2019 and every year to come. Because the truth is, and we're going to talk about this next week, you don't want to miss next week, okay? It's going to be awesome. What we're going to see next week is that most of us, we don't. We don't leverage it. We advocate it. Instead of using authority and initiating, we chicken out. And we're going to talk about how not to do that next Sunday.